welcome to the news. My name is Shalma Lawson. The news of the engagement of Zimbabwe's Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai to a businesswoman has stirred debate among Zimbabweans. Many people are wondering whether or not this would be followed by a wedding. Robert Tafumane spoke to some Harare residents about the issue.
The engagement of Zimbabwe's Prime Minister Morgan Tsvangirai last Friday to a 35-year-old businesswoman has been greeted with mixed feelings. Tsvangirai, who is also the leader of a function of the Movement for Democratic Change, got engaged at a private ceremony attended by close friends and relatives. However, his engagement to Elizabeth Macheka, the daughter of former Chitungwiza mayor and ZANU-PF Politburo member, has stirred a lot of controversy. The Prime Minister, who lost his wife in a car accident 3 years ago, has been linked to a string of women. Some women who spoke to ATV condemned his behavior, saying it did not benefit a leader of his stature.
Asi Elizabeth Macheka akambozviramba zviri kundishamisa kuti ari kuramba achingoenzera chiingenja munhu akaita saiyeye. Tsvangirai zvaari kutiitira mumushaka, ari kutiitira zvimini zvinokonzeresa kana kuti mvura isanaye, upenyu hwedu husaendere, tisagare zvakanaka. Haasi munhu watingati angatungamire ruzhinji rwevanhu muno, haatokodzeri zvachose.
Zvikuitwa naPrime Minister wedu zvinhu zvekuti shoropodza kana isu vakadzi. Akabva kupindudza munhu manje apapa akutisara pavana. Chihure chakafunga chaari kutiitira. Isu chero vakusaidi kwake vanoti chiye kuchinja, vanomira vakati chiinazvo. Kana isu techidiki tinotarisira tinochiuka tichiti baba vedu vaiti kudini. Kana masateguru edu tinoteera wani. Ngaregedze chihure chaari kutiitira, kangani nekangani. Apa ari kubva imwe nyaya yakaramba yelokadhiya.
6 months ago, Tsvangirai made headlines after he paid bride price for another businesswoman, Lokadia Karimatsenga Tembo, with ZANU-PF links, and later on called off the relationship, citing external interference. Tsvangirai also made headlines in recent years after he reportedly impregnated a 23-year-old Bulawayo woman. Another Harare resident said Tsvangirai was not the best role model for youth, especially at a time when the country is battling HIV and AIDS.
Prime Minister ngavaite hunhu, ngavatedze culture yedu, kana vada kuroora vorora mune zvakanaka. Handoni chakaipa nekuti vakanga vatoroora Lokadia. Uyezve kuti vakakanganisa nekuti muna November macho vakanga vasiri supposed kuti vakaenda koroora. Saka apa tisuziva kuti papapera mwedzi mingani taunzwa kuti vatoingeja vakuda kutoroora. Isu tinoti pasina zvatizvifariri semadzimai eZimbabwe.
Others felt that the PM had the right to marry any woman he loves.
The nation, and in particular myself, were getting worried what the minister was doing single-handedly without a wife in his life. However, he has married someone who is a bit younger than himself, somebody who is almost who could be called his daughter. But fine, he has got a wife in his life, somebody with the potential to become the first lady of the country.
I don't think at his age it should be a big deal.
But a lot of people are saying he's bit hopping from one woman to another. What's your comment?
Well, if we were to get into that, then we'll lose the whole gist of politics here in Zimbabwe, because every politician has been to one a woman or the other.
Another Harare resident said getting married would stabilize the PM's political career.
I think the wife aspect is also a stabilizing factor in a man's life. Remember, he's a politician and he needs to get on with his life. And initially we thought his last wife was the stabilizing factor in his life. So the coming in of somebody else, a woman who is formalized in that case, I think it's welcome.
Only time will tell whether this engagement will eventually lead to a marriage or the PM will put the reg under Elizabeth's feet. Robert Tafumane reporting for ATV, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Women in Zimbabwe continue to be marginalized despite constituting 52% of the country's 12 million population. Recently, Japan unveiled a 4.8 million grant to the country to address violence against women and children and for vaccines. Our reporter Muchaneta Chimuka gives us more.
The situation of rural women and children in Zimbabwe is very challenging, as they do not have regular access to health care and counseling services to address violence against them. Poor funding has over the years affected programs that seek to address problems facing women in rural areas. Last Friday, Japan unveiled a 4.8 million grant to Zimbabwe for the procurement of life-saving vaccines for children and for programs addressing violence against women and children. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, is managing the grant. ATV spoke to the UNICEF Zimbabwe country representative, Peter Salama, about the grant and the plight of rural women and children.
The objective of the grant on the health side is to scale up the program on expanded program on immunization. And that program is basically providing vaccines right across the country to target diseases such as measles, polio, diphtheria, whooping cough, and tetanus. So it's a critical program to reduce disability and death amongst children under 5. And the government of Japan has been supporting that program through UNICEF for the past few years to the tune of more than $20 million over the past 6 or 7 years. And today's grant was for almost $5 million US. The second aspect of the program was the scale up of a program targeting the survivors, the child and women survivors of violence and abuse. So these are children who've been abused predominantly in the home setting or the school setting, who require medical services, who require legal services, who require counseling, and who require ongoing support to prevent them being abused again. So that's a program with the Ministry of Labour and Social Services, and again this grant will be critical to scaling that up to the national level.
Violence against women and children in rural areas has risen sharply in the recent years. The women face numerous challenges such as lack of financial support, social security, violence and abuse, inadequate health facilities, and poverty in general.
The first, of course, is poverty itself, which is probably the biggest challenge in rural areas. And we know that through some of the other programs we're doing with the Ministry of Labour and Social Services, such as the National Cash Transfer Program, we're really trying to address this poverty head-on. So that cash transfer program is putting money in the hands of the poorest, the most extremely poor households every month, so that they can choose how to prioritize their household budgets to meet the basic food and non-food needs of the household. The other challenges, of course, are the HIV/AIDS epidemic, access to basic social services. We know that over the past 10 years, there's been a lot of increase of user fees. So whether that's user fees for health services, whether it's school fees to access basic education services, whether it's to pay for water and electricity, and we know that poor rural households are the ones that find it the hardest to pay for those services.
The grant, we hope, is some of the problems facing women and children in rural areas.
Tiri kusangana nematambudziko sanika isusu madzimai echidiki pakusununguka. Sekuzvipatira kwedu isusu unonzi tenga makenduru, uyai nemagloves, zvimwe zvekuti munhu unenge usina unozosvika pakusunungukira kumba kwausingazowana rubatsiro rwakakwana. Sezvakaita kuchipatara isusu tine vana vadiki, kwadzi uende kusikero nemwana unonzi anzouya nedhora ragadhi, hatisi kuziva kuti zviri kumbonyatsofamba sei. Kuti munharaunda medu makashotawo panyaya dzeutano matoireti. Ngavatibatsirwe nematoireti vakuru veda.
Some rural women were pessimistic about whether the grant would have an impact on their lives.
Kasi chinonetsa ndechekuti dhona anogona kuuya nemishonga kuti mishonga endauya nayo iri free kurapa vana. Tinozowanikwa pane dambudziko rokuti vanhu vanenge vakubhadhariswa. Vachinzi bhadharai kasi mushonga wauya zvawo free kuti vanhu varapwe.
Donor countries have poured millions of dollars into various development programs, but critics say the bulk of donor funds are not reaching the intended beneficiaries.
That's the reason why we've got this campaign. Because the main issue was that we have to do budget monitoring and expenditure tracking, not only for what government budgets, but also what is brought into the country to assist women, to see whether it is reaching the right people and it is actually doing or actually fulfilling the purpose for which it was actually committed to do. That's the reason why we did this particular research, which brought us here today.
Mchaneta Chimuka reporting for ATV.
For almost a decade, many Zimbabweans have enjoyed signal overflow from South Africa that has been enabling them to view SABC channels for free. However, this may soon come to an end. Crispin Tavura reports on the panic gripping Harare.
Reports about impending blocking of SABC channels in Botswana have raised fears among many Zimbabweans who have been also enjoying free signal overflow for almost a decade. The decision to block the signals at the end of the month was reached after Botswana, a sister company of ATV, successfully sued South Africa's state-owned broadcast signal distribution company, Syntec, in February over the piracy of television signals in Botswana. The court ordered Syntec to ensure that viewers in Botswana are prevented within 3 months from pirate viewing of the SABC channels. However, if this plan succeeds, many Southern African countries, including Zimbabwe, may also be affected. ATV spoke to some Harare residents to hear their views on the issue.
No, SABC ifanozimwa because it's affordable for munhu wese. Mwana vakwanisa kubhadhara DSTV. Zvinodependa nemari yakutambira but ndasadzimwe because anobudisa good programs.
Mechechingona teta kutongodzoka kumaZTV kwediko kone kuti mari atitombokwanise kuiwana.
In the case of Botswana, the free signal was reportedly seriously damaging growth in the local broadcast, production, advertising industries through the loss of potential advertising revenue. However, some viewers insisted that SABC channels should not be discontinued because they link them with their Southern African neighbor.
Tinofana kuitawo free machannels kunyangwe dzimwe nyika tiziye zviri kuitika kune dzimwe nyika kwete kungomirira chete tongorarama neZimbabwe chete neZTV. Tinotozvifarirawo kuti tikanga tichiona maprograms mamwe ari kubuda kunana South Africa kunyangwe nezvakafanana nekunana kana kunana Italy kana kunyika dzipi tinoti tichitoafarira maprograms akadaro.
We can't go without reading city kumba kwedu. We need it. Saka kana vakutikatira it's one of those things. I don't know what are we going to do. Vakutotita kuti pamwe tamhando, I don't know, but I think kuti vakadzorera wosiya zviripo toramba tichishare mawaves tichiona zviri kuitika ku South Africa. It's a good thing for us.
Suppliers of free-to-air decoders, which have become very popular in the country, also cried foul over the issue.
Manje kana kudaro tenta kuraiwa business medu sisina chokuitawo mukati muupenyu ati zvinhu zvakanya zvinhu zvakawanda stereki.
Some installers of decoders welcomed the move, saying,
makastoma ari kuwandisa fani vanhu vari kuwandisa vari kuswicha kuds kuti susu mawistake acho hatichatombonyanyo atengesi takutongodhila nemads.
pazuva anokwanisa kuinzora madishi ane average of 3 to 4 these days bva zvabuda shokera asi kudhara ndaikwanisa kuwana 1 kana kutoshayiwa kuona kana muvaviri pavhiki asi zviro zvati wandei.
Achitumbisa ine vanhu vazhinji vanodombodotetwa vaipota vachirejista madhekodhers avo kuti vakwanisa kuona DS.
Multi-Choice Zimbabwe and ZBC may have a reason to smile at the end of this month should the pirated signal be blocked, as viewers will be left with limited choice. Reporting for ATV, I am Crispin Tavura in Harare, Zimbabwe.
Thank you for joining us. Good night.